am the site reliability engineer, or what popular known as DevOps in the market, and I will be discussing about the field. And so I have a former colleague here. His name is Ola. He can introduce himself.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Oba. Currently work as a senior DevOps engineer with a property finder. Good to meet you all.
Okay, so we'll go straight to the first questions, and I just want to know what's the job description of a site reliability engineer or DevOps engineer.
This is quite an interesting question, and I think a lot of people will have different explanations to it. But the easiest one that always kind of strike me every time I work is a DevOps engineer or a site reliability engineer is someone that uses software development principles for system administration work. Now this sounds like a very technical work, but just look at it as somebody that is like a system engineer, that everything that the person does has to think like a developer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the easiest description.
Okay. So so the next question is, how did you become a site reliability engineer?
I think I became a site reliability engineer by chance and by being tutored in that way. So it started off quite a long time ago when I had a CTO that talked to me. I was like, oh, Oba, I want you to start coding. Then I was pretty good with bash scripting. I could do a bit around with a bash and shell and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, why do I need Python? But because it was part of kind of my, how do you call it, my performance review for the year, I was like, yep, I need to learn Python. And I just took it as a kind of with a soft hand. But I think one of the fundamental part that changed it was I had an interview with Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So the first two interviews were very easy for me. I was blazing the system administration questions, the Linux kernels, the whole networking. But then the third part was basically to kind of do a peer programming with a software developer. And this guy was one of the core developers of Python.
Yeah.
So, we were doing peer programming and he was telling me, oh, why did you do this? Why are you using ifs here? In that point, I was not like, your code Python developer. I was like, yeah, it's true, but in my day-to-day job, I work with hundreds of servers, hundred thousands of servers. It was sometimes you need to think of how do you patch over 50,000 servers.
Yeah.
At that point, I was managing less than 50 servers.
Yeah.
That was mind-blowing for me because I kind of now started to think about what skills people were. And I think over that time, that now switched me to, started learning about programming, about automating, random work. Started from, maybe switching IPs, those kind of stuff shouldn't be done with a bash scripting. Easily you can use AWS SDK, especially with error handling. And from there I started poking into developers code to understand okay, is there a way we can do this better? And that's how I just became a DevOps engineer.
Okay, that's quite interesting. In the long run, I usually see most people go into software engineering mainly. Why did you, for example, decide to be fast? I'm just going straight into DevOps. Yeah. So
I initially said I started off as a system engineer. I remember during my BSc I was already certified, a Linux certified administrator.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, because I needed to learn programming, I was like, do I really want to switch to programming? At the point I thought of it because it's a career change, which I was ready to embrace.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I still like to get my hands dirty. I still want to do, fixing kernels, literally going to understand what's happened with netstart, htop, and all those kind of interesting commands. And I figured out the real sweet spot is actually sitting in the middle. That's in between a system administrator and being a developer, because it involves automating a lot. And that's where it comes really beautiful. Is a typical system administrator wants to do a lot around write those commands on top of their head. Let's say, like they put so many commands in their head, they want to, let's say, write some bash scripting. And as a software developer, everything is just kind of like as a programming. And now when you come to a DevOps, uses both sides of the word to actually solve like a real life problems. And that's where it comes really, really interesting.
Okay, that's really good. So yeah, now I'll be looking into like skill sets required. Like based on your experience, what skill sets are really key for a DevOps engineer?
I think two primary skills, which is really important. One is you need to know your Linux very well.
Yeah.
Like I've talked to quite a number of people. One of the person that I always look up to is like a Kelsey Hightower.
Yeah.
He started off as a system engineer, straight up to like a developer, then became a developer advocate for Google. If you look at the journey, is you need to know your Linux stuff very well. I mean, you need to know straight from like your, like your netcat to any random commands that that you can think of. And the second part is you need to be very good with like software development. That you can't take away from it. I think it's before like we appreciate people that can write like 1,000 lines of bash script where you use a lot of functions to join them. Now is you need to think about, we want some, like developers want someone that can actually program, that can, like a program that can be properly tested and something that can really, really, you can iterate over and build over it. Apart from those two skills, there are some soft skills that you need, they call it automation. As much as, I think that's what sets how do I call it? Puts like a site reliability engineer or a DevOps engineer away from the glorified system administrator. I mean, you look at one interesting bit is most time you discover like a glorified system administrator wants to patch like 50 servers. We're like, oh, I have a bash script that will do like a for loop. Perfect, it works. But then how do you handle when you cannot SSH to the 50 servers, the whole script breaks? Now that's the difference between when you have like a site reliability engineer or a DevOps engineer knows like I need to use like a tool, like some tools, or I need to write like a proper code that can actually do error handling. Or instead of doing SSH keys and you put like secrets, you basically just putting like password around, you can use like something like like a key generator and all those kind of stuff. And that's what makes it different between like a software developer, like a site reliability engineer and a kind of like, let me call it like a glorified system.
Okay, so yeah, based on your experience, which tools like have you used to really consider quite great for really want to know? And
so it's quite interesting. I think that's what comes with like being like a DevOps engineer is you need to evolve with time a lot. Because when I remember when I started with Puppet, which was really awesome then, and from Puppet moved to like SaltStack, mainly for configuration management. Then over time, like for like a system, for like a software, I always keep going back to software engineer, because a real DevOps engineer has to actually think like a software engineer. So currently I work a lot with like Terraform, and mainly what Terraform does is it does like orchestration of like tools. For example, if I need to create like AWS, AWS EC2 instance, I don't want to go to the console, to do that. Or for example, some of the things that like I do day to day is, for example, let's say like we want to create like like a monitoring alert on Datadog. It's nice, you can do that on the console, but then how do you repeat the same step like 50 times? That's where like Terraform comes into play. It's mainly like an orchestration tool. Another tool that works that I use often these days is called Ansible. So Ansible is a kind of like a configuration management tool. It's very similar to SaltStack that I talked about previously. But the good thing about Ansible is very lightweight and it only works with SSH. So it's mainly like a configuration management tool. If I need to install like Apache on like 1,000 servers, which I don't have an idea of the IP address. This is where Ansible comes into play. Easily you can write like a playbook, or for example, I need to kind of maybe do like maybe I need to change like configuration files on like my web servers. This is where Ansible comes into play. And these days, another interesting tool that really in vogue is Kubernetes. So as a DevOps engineer, you need to know a lot about Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is like a grandfather of so many other tools that come in between. So from Kubernetes, you need to know about Docker, which is like a container orchestration. And for you to know about Docker, that means you need to know how to build an image. For you to build an image, one easy way is to use Jenkins. And there are other tools that comes into play with it. And I think in the future, one of the tools that will really evolve over time is, people are using it now, but it's much more common with data scientists. It's called like a Python notebook. Because if you're thinking like a DevOps engineer, for example, let's say we have like today, as a DevOps engineer or site reliability engineer, you're much more about making your application stack as reliable as possible. So if today we have like 50 people coming into our website, and tomorrow we're having like 1,000, but the truth is, over time there is like a pattern. How do you do like a predictive scaling around it? This is where you need something called like machine learning to do all this kind of stuff. And really that means like as a DevOps engineer, you're already going from like a system administrator to like a software engineer to like a data scientist.
Okay, quite interesting insights there. So let me assume this is like a bit of the final question, or a parting shot. I usually say it's kind of a parting shot. Maybe there is someone, a fresh grad from college, or there is someone studied something else, maybe electrical engineering or JS, and wants to shift into DevOps. What advice will you give to this person? Where should this person start, and until to be able to be have the key skills to do site reliability engineering roles?
I think that's quite interesting. I think one thing I always tell people is, you need to, number one, you need to kind of choose people that you roam around with, because it's from there you kind of learn. And another thing around it, another way to learn is it comes with passion, and you choose like something that you're passionate about, like a project. And over time, think of, if I want to learn a skill around this, how can I apply it to it? So I'll put one interesting example, which it's always one example that I always put a lot. I think it's one fundamental part that can help me, is I always choose something that I do very often and look at a way to automate it. Like that thing should work perfectly when I'm not there. And apart from just working perfectly when I'm not there, I kind of look at, is there a way I can make it much better? And for example, if you're somebody so it's one interesting bit that I do quite often at work is when I kind of put like a label on my pull request, which is using GitHub. Instead of me going back to check whether it's been reviewed, once it's reviewed, I automatically merge it, because I have a script that pulls. Because for me, I was like, I don't want to keep going back every time to actually check like it's been reviewed and merge it. That saves me a lot with time. And another part that comes, quite interesting with it is I do contributions to like the open source community. From there, contributing to like open source projects, you get to learn about how they actually write codes, how they actually think. And I think it's that way that I knew like, oh, maybe I could actually implement this, where I'm currently working. And I think initially it always take me aback, because when I contribute, like you open a pull request, sometimes they just close it immediately. They're like, it's crap. Or sometimes like you have to refactor. But because it's challenging, I know like it's a learning process for me, and I get to learn about how they actually think. And I was like, oh, this is, like sometimes you just open like pull request, and you think like, oh, this is not this is harmless, and they just flag like a lot of red flags, and you're like, okay, if they could actually flag this, that means they have like an automation tool. Can I use this automation tool in current place that I'm working? And this is how you actually develop yourself.
Okay. That's really it. I'm really thankful for this. Yeah. So guys, that's all about DevOps. I'll put a LinkedIn profile for Oba on the description below. And if you're interested in being a site reliability engineer, it comes in many terms. Like you tend to find adverts saying DevOps, which one? There's platform.
There's a platform engineer, there is a site reliability engineer, and there is a production engineer.
Yeah, so all those titles kind of relate to the same role and job description, okay? So see you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.